Hello, my name is Jacob Friend, and this is my presentation, my phenology presentation on the spring phenology of London plane trees, Plantinus acerifolia, here in Tucson, Arizona. The London plane tree was a little bit of an interesting choice. I wanted to do it because it is a hybrid. It is a hybrid between the North American sycamore and a species of sycamore native to Japan. And I was just kind of curious on how these individuals that were not native to this area would react to the conditions that they were welcome to here in the Sonoran Desert. The two individuals that I looked at were on the north side of the Med Research Building, and they were kind of in that little pseudo slot canyon there, tucked in between the buildings. The photographs and the written records that I took were about every 1 to 2 weeks. So I went there, I looked at them, I took the photos just about every 1 to 2 weeks to try and get a pretty even representation of what was going on, to see if it was like a linear basis or a non-linear basis, just to see how these plants reacted to the changing seasons. Cool. So my working hypothesis is that as photoperiods and temperatures continue to increase, the London plane tree will sprout buds, grow leaves, and bloom prior to the end of the semester. Quite simply, this will answer my question of when will London plane tree that is not native to Arizona grow leaves and produce flowers in the spring months? I felt that this was an important question and that its answers could be important because of the horticultural and ethical land management uses that this plant sees here in Arizona. Like, what is going on here with this non-native plant being exposed to drastic temperature changes between day and night, as well as extreme heat and little precipitation that this species that is not native to this ecosystem will undergo here? So here's a little graphical representation of the dead leaf retention versus living leaf retention. So on the x-axis there, I just have a little timeline that goes about every, half month or so from February until April. And this is, as you can see, the blue there, it decreases and then meets living leaf retention sometime there around March 16th. And this probably was not a perfect, obviously a perfect 50-50 meeting point, but it was pretty darn close. And in the days that I went and checked it was very interesting to see that it lost these leaves and gained new leaves at about the same rate. And growth of a single leaf took about roughly 2 weeks, just kind of as an interesting aside. So here we're looking at the temperature averages in degrees for Tucson. And so right here we had February as a warmer and April uh, as the warmest, but then March was the coldest one, which is kind of interesting because these temperatures didn't necessarily have an effect on the phenology of this tree. The temperatures, honestly, they didn't vary that much. They stayed pretty average throughout those 3 months, and maybe the lows got a little bit different, but the average temperatures were pretty similar. And so I kind of expected these temperatures to have an effect, they didn't. Photo periods, however, as they continue to increase, as they will always continue to increase during the spring, since that's just the time of daylight, that did lengthen. And of course, the tree continued to grow and photosynthesize with its new leaves and take advantage of that longer light. So here I just have three pictures of one of the trees that I was looking at. You can see this tree here on the left. This was the very first day on the left, and then the most recent observation on the right. And then in that middle there is that day that I thought represented a good 50-50. That was my, ideal kind of balancing point or tipping point between new growth and dead growth, or old growth, rather. And here's just a little more up close look. These are from those same 3 days, just a little bit more up close. So you can see, most importantly, I think on that middle one, you can see the buds there are really starting to come in and they're kind of pushing off those old leaves as they really do grow, which was quite interesting to see and observe. From the span of February 1st to April 11th, that London plane tree lost its dead leaves, budded, and it leafed out partially. It wasn't fully there yet, but it was mostly there. And this took place at a rate that was similar to nearby plants leafing out, which was kind of interesting. Looking around, there was a Texas red oak that was nearby, one of the Quercus buckleyi. And I was looking at that, and it was growing at the same rate that the London plane tree was, and that was a really interesting thing to see, considering that these two trees typically do not share a common, native range. Um, so clearly, the environmental factors here were very fortuitous for these two species and a few others that were involved as well, and, planted there being involved uh, for this time period. Now, one thing that was interesting is this individual that I was studying never did flower. It falsified that part of my hypothesis, but that was okay. That was kind of interesting. Maybe the tree was just a little bit too young within its life cycle to flower, or maybe the current growing conditions were not suitable for it to feel the desire to flower. There were momentary heat waves that gave me some troubles. I'll be honest, like even though I was going out there once every 1 to 2 weeks, there were some points where I wish I had gone a little bit shorter time frames because it seemed like within the span of 3 days, maybe we would get a span of like 3 days that was really high 80s, maybe even low 90s at some points. And that really just turbocharged the growth on these leaves. Um, and so some of the observations that I took were a little bit uneven, even if in the grand scheme of things, it played out to a pretty even growth and decline of old leaves. Um, and another thing too that was kind of difficult is these plants were being watered. They're being watered by drip irrigation, and I was not able to understand how much water they were getting on a daily basis. I'm sure they got something. These are inherently riparian species, so these are species that really love water. I don't know how much they were getting. It was a particularly dry spring, and so they certainly were not getting enough just from the precipitation alone. And another thing that I found really interesting is that it is clear that these non-native plants can tolerate 50 plus degree temperature swings. And of course, maybe this was all enabled by drip irrigation. Who knows? These plants were doing really well. They were really happy. Um, yeah, thank you for watching my presentation. Here are my sources, and that is all.